The sun rose over the kingdom of Dagara, casting its golden light on the vast savanna, where the roar of lions and the chatter of monkeys filled the air. In the heart of this powerful land stood the royal palace, a sprawling structure made of red clay and adorned with intricate carvings of leopards, eagles, and baobab trees, symbols of wisdom, power, and resilience. King Adebayo, ruler of Dagara, sat on his grand ebony throne, carved with the images of his conquests. A towering man with a sharp gaze and a commanding presence, he exuded strength, but his heart was restless. For years, Adebayo had dreamed of uniting the smaller kingdoms surrounding Dagara into one great empire. He believed it was his destiny, a calling from the gods. Elder Kofi, the king's chief advisor, stood at the edge of the throne room, his white beard flowing like the rivers of time. He had served 3 kings before Adebayo, and his wisdom was revered across the kingdom. "Your Majesty," Kofi began, "there is strength in unity, but one must tread carefully. As the proverb says, when a bird builds its nest too wide, the wind finds a way in. Expansion can bring great prosperity or great ruin." Adebayo waved his hand dismissively. "You speak of caution, elder, but I see only opportunity. The smaller kingdoms squabble like children. They need a strong hand to guide them, and we will be that hand." Before Kofi could reply, a sudden cry rang out. From the palace gates came a commotion, and a messenger burst into the throne room. His clothes were torn, and his face was pale with fear. "Your Majesty," he gasped, "an eagle! An eagle has come to the palace. It will not leave." Adebayo frowned, but rose from his throne. He was not a superstitious man, but he respected the symbols of the gods. The eagle was a creature of prophecy and vision. The king, accompanied by Kofi and a retinue of guards, walked to the palace courtyard. There, perched on the edge of a marble fountain, was a magnificent eagle with feathers that shimmered like polished bronze. Its sharp eyes seemed to pierce the soul of anyone who dared look into them. The bird let out a cry that echoed through the courtyard. Then, to the astonishment of all, it spoke in a voice deep and resonant. "The thorn of the leopard will humble the lion." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd. The eagle flapped its wings, circled once above the palace, and disappeared into the horizon. "What does this mean?" Adebayo demanded, his voice tinged with both anger and confusion. Elder Kofi stepped forward, his expression grave. "The leopard is a symbol of wisdom and cunning, while the lion represents strength and dominance. This prophecy warns that strength alone cannot guarantee success. There is a challenge ahead, one that requires more than power." Adebayo's jaw tightened. He was a man of action, not riddles. Prophecies are for those who lack the courage to shape their own destiny. We will not be distracted by the ramblings of an eagle. Prepare the army. We march on Nyoka within the month. Kofi hesitated but bowed his head. "As you wish, Your Majesty. But remember, the wise one who listens learns. The fool who speaks loses." The king ignored him and turned to issue orders to his generals. Deep in his heart, however, the eagle's words lingered like a shadow. The kingdom of Nyoka was a land of lush forests and winding rivers, where life thrived under the careful stewardship of its ruler, Queen Malika. Known as the Serpent Queen, she had earned her title not through treachery, but through wisdom and adaptability. Her kingdom was smaller than Dagara, but its people were fiercely loyal, and its forests held secrets that no invader had ever unraveled. In her court, Queen Malika sat on a throne carved from the wood of an ancient Iroko tree. Her attire was simple but elegant, adorned with symbols of the serpent, coiled bracelets, and a golden necklace shaped like a serpent swallowing its tail, a symbol of eternity. Her eyes, sharp and knowing, missed nothing. She listened intently as her trusted counsel discussed rumors of King Adebayo's ambition to conquer Nyoka. Her chief strategist, a wiry man named Tano, stepped forward. "Your Majesty," Tano began, "our scouts report that Dagara is preparing its army. King Adebayo's intent is clear. He seeks to take our land and our people." Malika nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the armrest of her throne. "And the artifact," she murmured. Tano hesitated. "Yes, Your Majesty, the Heart of Umoja. It is said that Adebayo believes possessing it will cement his rule over all kingdoms." The Heart of Umoja was a relic of legend, said to have been crafted by the ancestors to symbolize unity and harmony. It was not a mere object of gold and jewels, but a sacred symbol of leadership and wisdom. Though few had seen it, the people of Nyoka believed it was hidden deep in the leopard's den, a sacred site guarded by the spirits of their ancestors. Malika rose from her throne, her expression firm. "Adebayo does not understand what he seeks. The heart cannot be taken by force. It is protected by a power that his might cannot overcome." Tano frowned. "But his armies are vast, and his generals are ruthless. We must prepare for war." Malika shook her head. "War is his strength. We will not fight him on his terms. Nyoka will not bow, but neither will we shed blood needlessly. Let us meet his ambition with wisdom." She called for a meeting of the elders and spiritual leaders, who arrived bearing ceremonial staffs and wearing robes adorned with ancestral symbols. Together, they discussed how to protect Nyoka without resorting to open conflict. Malika shared her vision. "We will not confront Adebayo with weapons, but with the wisdom of our ancestors. Let the leopard's den be his trial. If he truly seeks unity, he must prove himself worthy. If not, he will face the consequences of his arrogance." The elders nodded in agreement, chanting a blessing. "The spirit of the land will protect its people." Malika smiled faintly. "Good. You will have a role to play in the days to come. King Adebayo seeks to take what cannot be taken by force. You will help him understand this truth." Kofi blinked, puzzled. "Your Majesty, I am but a humble trader. What can I do against a king?" Malika's voice grew firm. "A story well told can change a man's heart more than 1,000 warriors. Prepare yourself. The time will come when you must speak, and your words will carry the fate of kingdoms." As Kofi left the palace, his mind swirled with questions. What could the queen mean? And how could he, an ordinary man, stand against the might of Dagara? Little did he know that his journey was only beginning. The kingdom of Dagara buzzed with the energy of preparation. Soldiers sharpened their spears, blacksmiths worked tirelessly at their forges, and generals reviewed maps with intense focus. King Adebayo, standing on a balcony overlooking the vast palace courtyard, felt a surge of pride at the sight of his mighty army. Soon, the kingdom of Nyoka would bow to his rule, and the Heart of Umoja would be his. But not all within the palace shared his enthusiasm. Princess Nia, Adebayo's youngest daughter, watched the preparations with a heavy heart. Unlike her father, Nia had little interest in conquest. She was known for her gentle spirit and sharp mind, traits that endeared her to the common people, but often drew her father's disdain. As she wandered the palace gardens, Nia's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Elder Kofi. The old man moved slowly, his cane tapping against the stone path, but his mind remained as sharp as ever. "Princess," Kofi greeted her with a warm smile. "Your heart is troubled." Nia sighed. "Father sees unity only in conquest, but there must be another way. How can we claim to lead if we destroy what we seek to unite?" Kofi nodded. "Your heart speaks wisdom. As the elders say, the headstrong warrior may conquer the field, but the wise one wins the peace. But your father's ears are closed to such words." "Then what can I do?" Nia asked, her voice tinged with frustration. "He will not listen to me." Kofi's eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief. The gods often use unlikely hands to shape their will. "Perhaps your path lies outside the palace walls." Nia frowned, puzzled by his words. But before she could ask more, the sound of horses' hooves drew her attention. A caravan of traders had arrived at the palace gates, their carts laden with goods from across the region. Among the traders was Kofi of Nyoka. He had traveled to Dagara with silks, spices, and gemstones, but also with a secret mission from Queen Malika. His task was to learn all he could about Dagara's plans, and if possible, sow the seeds of doubt among its people. As the traders set up their wares, Nia, eager for a distraction, made her way to the market. She was drawn to Kofi's stall by the sound of his voice as he told a story to a small crowd. "And so," Kofi concluded, "the monkey who tried to steal the lion's meal learned too late that greed blinds even the cleverest of minds." The crowd chuckled and clapped, and Nia couldn't help but smile. There was something captivating about the trader's storytelling. His words carried not just entertainment, but a deeper truth. "You have a gift," Nia said as she approached him. Kofi bowed, recognizing her royal attire. "A story is a gift meant to be shared, princess. How may I serve you?" Nia glanced around, ensuring no one was listening. "Tell me, what do you know of Nyoka?" Kofi's heart raced. He had not expected to encounter someone like the princess so soon. "Nyoka is a land of rivers and forests," he said carefully. "A place where wisdom flows as freely as water. And you, princess, what do you seek to know?" Nia hesitated, then spoke with quiet urgency. "I wish to know the truth. Is it true that Nyoka possesses the Heart of Umoja? And why does your queen resist my father's rule?" Kofi studied her, sensing the sincerity in her voice. He decided to take a risk. "The heart is more than a relic, princess. It is a lesson. And as for Queen Malika, she resists because she understands what your father does not. Unity cannot be forced. It must be earned." Nia felt a spark of hope. Here was someone who shared her doubts about her father's plans. "And what would you do, trader, if you wished to stop a war?" Kofi smiled. "I would start with a story." Nia returned his smile, a plan forming in her mind. "Then perhaps you and I can work together. My father is set on conquest, but there are those within this kingdom who might listen to reason. Will you help me?" Kofi hesitated. His loyalty was to Nyoka, but he sensed that Nia's intentions were pure, and he had always believed that a single story, told at the right time, could change the course of history. "I will help," he said at last, "but we must tread carefully. As the elders say, the river is patient, but it wears down the strongest rock." The moon hung low over the kingdom of Dagara, casting pale light over the bustling palace. Preparations for war were in full swing, and the tension among the king's generals was palpable. They spoke in hurried tones, poring over maps and discussing strategies to breach Nyoka's defenses. But far from the war room, another plan was quietly unfolding. Princess Nia sat in her private chambers, a small oil lamp casting a soft glow on her worried face. Opposite her sat Kofi, the Nyokan trader. Though their alliance was tentative, the weight of their mission had already begun to bind them. "Nyoka is prepared for this," Kofi said, his voice low. "Your father's forces may march, but they will find no easy victory." "And yet," Nia replied, "my father will not relent unless he believes this war will cost him more than he gains. We need to show him that the path he's chosen will only lead to ruin." Kofi nodded, admiring her resolve. "There is a story in my land," he began. "It tells of a hunter who chased a leopard for days, thinking it would bring him glory. But when he cornered it, the leopard turned and led him into a trap set by the ancestors. He learned too late that the hunt blinded him to his own peril. Adebayo frowned. The leopard's den is a sacred site. The people of Nyoka will defend it fiercely. This will not be as simple as you believe. Oba pressed on. But imagine the reward. The Heart of Umoja in your hands would solidify your claim as the greatest ruler in history. The smaller kingdoms would fall in line without question. The king's eyes gleamed at the thought, but he hesitated. The prophecy of the eagle still lingered in his mind, a shadow he could not shake. He turned to Elder Kofi, who stood silently at the edge of the room. "What do you think, Elder?" Adebayo asked, his tone cautious. The old man stroked his beard, choosing his words carefully. "My king, as the ancestors say, the wise man looks at the road ahead, not just the step before him. The leopard's den is not merely a place of legend. It is a test, one that will challenge more than your strength. Are you prepared for what you may face there?" Oba's lips tightened, but Adebayo waved him off. "Enough. I will decide soon." Back in Nia's chambers, Kofi rose to his feet. "I must return to the market before I missed, but we have planted the first seeds of doubt. Now, we must water them." "And how do we do that?" Nia asked, standing as well. "You must be seen," Kofi replied. "Your voice carries weight, princess. Speak to the people. Let them hear another vision for the future, one of peace, not conquest." Nia hesitated. "If my father discovers this, he will not," Kofi said firmly. "Not yet, but remember, the chick that speaks out is heard by the eagle. If you want to change your father's path, you must be bold." The next day, Nia began her quiet campaign. Disguised as a commoner, she ventured into the streets of Dagara, listening to the people's concerns and sharing subtle words of caution. She spoke of the costs of war, of the families it would tear apart, and the lives it would destroy. At the same time, Kofi used his storytelling to reach the soldiers preparing for battle. In the evenings, he told tales of wise rulers who sought peace over conflict, leaving his audience with questions they could not ignore. Even within the palace, whispers of dissent began to grow. Some of the king's advisors wondered if the campaign against Nyoka was worth the risk, while others began to question Oba's motives. One night, as Nia returned from the marketplace, she found Elder Kofi waiting for her in the palace gardens. "Princess," he said, his tone urgent, "your father has summoned the war council. General Oba is pressing for an immediate march on Nyoka." Nia's heart raced. "We are not ready. He must be stopped." Kofi placed a hand on her shoulder. "There is still hope. Remember, the drumbeat of wisdom can drown out the noise of folly. Trust in your voice and in those who believe in your vision." Nia nodded, determination hardening her resolve. The time for action was near, and the fate of two kingdoms hung in the balance. The great hall of the palace was alive with tension as the war council gathered. King Adebayo sat at the head of the table, his face unreadable but his mind ablaze with questions. Around him, his generals and advisors discussed strategies, maps, and the next steps in their march toward Nyoka. Among them was General Oba, whose voice rose above the others, confident and insistent. "My king," Oba declared, pointing to a map of Nyoka spread across the table. "We must strike now, while the element of surprise is on our side. The leopard's den holds the key to Nyoka's power. Once we possess the Heart of Umoja, the other kingdoms will fall in line." "And what of the resistance we will face?" Elder Kofi interjected, his calm voice cutting through the fervor. "The leopard's den is more than a place. It is a sacred site, protected by the spirits of the ancestors. No force has ever taken it by might alone." Oba scoffed. "With all respect, Elder, the spirits will not stop spears and swords. This is a matter for soldiers, not stories." Adebayo held up his hand, silencing the room. His gaze lingered on the map, then shifted to the faces of his council. Elder Kofi, he said, you speak of the spirits. Tell me, what do you believe we will face in the leopard's den? The elder stepped forward, leaning on his staff. Your Majesty, the leopard's den is said to test those who enter. It challenges not the body, but the spirit. Greed, arrogance, and hatred are punished there, while wisdom and humility are rewarded. It is not a place for conquest, but for reflection. The king frowned. Reflection will not bring me the heart of Umoja. Perhaps not, Kofi replied, but it may save your soul. The room fell silent, the weight of his words pressing on the gathered council. General Oba broke the silence, his voice dripping with disdain. Your Majesty, this is nothing but folklore meant to frighten children. Let us march and claim what is rightfully ours. Adebayo leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. We will march, but with caution. The leopard's den will not be taken lightly. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Princess Nia listened from behind a carved wooden screen, her heart pounding. Her father's decision to proceed filled her with dread, but she knew the seeds of doubt planted by Kofi and herself had begun to sprout. She needed to act quickly. That night, she summoned Kofi to her chambers. We have little time, she told him. My father is determined to march on the leopard's den, but I fear what will happen if he fails the test. Kofi nodded, his expression grave. The ancestors will not allow him to take the heart by force. He must see the truth before it is too late. How can we make him see? Nia asked. Kofi was silent for a moment, then said, we must guide him to the truth, but not directly. If we intervene too openly, he will reject it out of pride. Instead, we must work from within the army. Nia frowned. You mean join the march? Yes, Kofi said. I will go as a trader, offering my services to the soldiers. You must come as well, disguised. Together, we can spread the stories that will prepare them for what lies ahead. Nia hesitated. The thought of joining the march into Nyoka filled her with fear, but she knew Kofi was right. Very well, she said, but we must be careful. If my father discovers us, Kofi smiled faintly. As the elders say, the path of truth is never easy, but it is always worth walking. A week later, the army of Dagara set out for Nyoka. The journey was grueling, passing through arid plains, dense forests, and winding rivers. The soldiers were confident, but whispers of the leopard's den began to circulate among them. Kofi, traveling with the caravan of traders that accompanied the army, skillfully planted stories of the den's spiritual power, warning of the tests that awaited. At night, around campfires, he told tales of those who had entered the den with greed in their hearts and never returned. He spoke of the ancestors' wrath and the wisdom needed to navigate the trials. Some soldiers laughed, dismissing his stories as superstition, but others listened intently, their resolve wavering. Nia, disguised as a healer, moved among the soldiers, tending to wounds and listening to their concerns. She spoke gently of peace, planting questions in their minds. What was the true cost of this war? What would happen if they failed? Slowly, doubt began to spread. The threshold of the den. After weeks of travel, the army arrived at the edge of the leopard's den. The sight was unlike anything they had seen before. A vast expanse of jagged rocks and towering cliffs shrouded in mist. Strange carvings marked the stones, depicting leopards, eagles, and other animals entwined in intricate patterns. The air was heavy with an unexplainable energy, as though the land itself was alive. King Adebayo stood at the forefront, his generals at his side. We will set camp here, he announced. At dawn, we will enter. Elder Kofi stepped forward, his staff tapping against the stone. Your Majesty, take heed. The den is not a place for haste. Before you step foot within, ask yourself, Are you prepared to face what lies in your heart? Adebayo scowled. Enough of your riddles, elder. We march at dawn. As the king turned away, Kofi and Nia exchanged a worried glance. The final test was at hand, and they could only hope that their efforts to guide the king and his army had not been in vain. The dawn broke cold and silent over the leopard's den. The mist that had shrouded the jagged cliffs the night before still lingered, twisting and shifting as though alive. King Adebayo stood at the head of his army, his hand resting on the hilt of his ceremonial sword. Behind him, his generals and soldiers awaited his command, their expressions a mix of determination and unease. Today, Adebayo declared, his voice echoing through the mist, we claim the heart of Umoja and secure the future of Dagara. We march as lions, and no den of leopards will stop us. The soldiers let out a cheer, though it lacked the vigor of confidence. Whispers of the leopard's den and the stories told by Kofi had seeped into their minds, filling their hearts with doubt, yet no one dared voice their fears aloud. Nia, still disguised as a healer, stood among the army's attendants. She exchanged a glance with Kofi, who was busy packing supplies onto a mule. Both knew that the real battle was not one of swords, but of spirit. The descent into the den. As the army entered the leopard's den, an unnatural stillness fell over the land. The sound of their footsteps seemed to be swallowed by the mist, and the air grew heavier with each passing moment. The strange carvings on the rocks seemed to shift when no one was looking, their patterns taking on new forms that defied logic. At the front of the column, General Oba marched with confidence, his eyes scanning for any sign of the heart of Umoja. Beside him, King Adebayo moved with a determined stride, though his face betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the canyon, carrying with it a haunting sound, a low, mournful wail that echoed off the cliffs. The soldiers froze, their eyes darting around in fear. What trickery is this? Oba barked, drawing his sword. Elder Kofi stepped forward, his staff planted firmly in the ground. It is no trickery, he said, his voice calm but firm. The ancestors are watching. This is their warning. Turn back or face their judgment. Adebayo clenched his fists. I am not afraid of shadows and whispers. We press on. As they moved deeper into the den, the terrain grew treacherous. The path narrowed, forcing the army to proceed in single file. Strange lights flickered in the mist, and faint voices could be heard, speaking in a language no one could understand. Some soldiers murmured prayers, while others gripped their weapons tighter. The first trial. The army came to a clearing where the ground was littered with jagged stones. At the center of the clearing stood a massive stone pillar, engraved with ancient symbols. As the soldiers gathered around, the pillar began to glow with a soft golden light. A voice echoed through the air, deep and resonant, as if the land itself was speaking. Those who seek the heart must prove their worth. Step forward and show your true self. The soldiers looked at one another, hesitant to move. Finally, General Oba stepped forward, his face set in a defiant scowl. I will prove my worth. As he approached the pillar, the light grew brighter, enveloping him in a golden aura. For a moment, he stood tall, but then his expression twisted into one of fear. He dropped his sword and fell to his knees, clutching his head. No! Oba shouted, his voice filled with terror. It's mine! I deserve it! The golden light flared once more, and Oba was thrown back, landing hard on the ground. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes wild. This is a trick! I will not be judged by stones and spirits. The voice spoke again. Greed blinds the unworthy. Step aside. Oba staggered back, his confidence shattered. The soldiers murmured among themselves, their fear growing. The second trial. King Adebayo stepped forward, his jaw set. "I am no coward," he declared. "If this is a test, I will pass it." As he approached the pillar, the golden light enveloped him as well. His expression remained calm at first, but then his face contorted with pain. He saw visions, his armies burning, his people in chains, his throne shattered. He heard the voice of the eagle from his palace courtyard. "The thorn of the leopard will humble the lion." Adebayo gritted his teeth, refusing to falter. "This is an illusion," he growled. "I will not be swayed by fear." The voice responded, "Pride blinds the unworthy. Step aside." The light vanished, and Adebayo stumbled back, his breathing heavy. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Seeing her father struggle, Nia felt a surge of determination. She stepped forward, removing her healer's cloak and revealing herself to the army. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they recognized the princess. "Nia?" Adebayo said, his voice filled with disbelief. "What are you doing here?" "I came to stop you," she said boldly. "Father, this is not the way. The Heart of Umoja is not something you can take by force. It must be earned." "You dare defy me?" Adebayo demanded. "I dare to tell you the truth," Nia replied. She turned to the pillar and stepped into the light. The golden aura surrounded her, but instead of pain or fear, Nia felt a deep sense of peace. She saw visions of Dagara and Nyoka, not as enemies, but as allies. She heard the voices of the ancestors, their words clear and gentle. The one who seeks unity must first understand humility. The light faded, and the pillar split open, revealing a path deeper into the den. The voice spoke once more. "The path is open, but only the worthy may proceed. Those who carry pride and greed will find no passage." Adebayo stared at the opening, his pride warring with his doubt. Finally, he looked at Nia. "You led us here. What would you have me do?" Nia met his gaze, her eyes filled with quiet strength. "Let me guide you, father. Together, we can find the truth." Adebayo hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. Lead the way." As the army watched, Nia and Adebayo stepped through the opening, followed by Elder Kofi and a few trusted soldiers. The rest were left behind, their hearts heavy with unanswered questions. The path beyond the stone pillar led deep into the heart of the leopard's den. The air was thick and damp, carrying the faint scent of earth and moss. Strange sounds echoed around them, whispers, laughter, and the distant roar of an unseen beast. The group moved cautiously, their steps illuminated by faint, flickering lights that seemed to dance along the walls. King Adebayo walked behind Nia, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. He had always prided himself on his strength and determination, yet the trials of the den had shaken his confidence. Elder Kofi followed closely, his staff tapping rhythmically against the ground. "This place feels alive," Adebayo muttered, glancing at the shifting shadows. "It is alive," Kofi replied. "The leopard's den is not merely a place. It is a reflection of the soul. What we see here depends on what lies within us." Nia glanced back at her father. "The ancestors are watching, father. If we are to succeed, we must be honest with ourselves." Adebayo grunted but said nothing. The group entered a vast chamber, its walls covered in ancient carvings of leopards, serpents, and eagles. In the center of the chamber stood a shallow pool of water, its surface perfectly still. The moment they stepped inside, the carvings began to glow, and a deep voice filled the air. "To find the heart, you must confront your past. Each of you will see the truth within this pool. Only those who accept what they see may continue." Nia stepped forward first, her heart pounding. She knelt by the pool and gazed into its surface. The water shimmered, and an image appeared, a vision of her as a child, standing before a burning village. She recognized it as one of the smaller kingdoms her father had conquered. In the vision, she saw herself trying to help a frightened child escape the flames, only to be pulled away by a soldier. The child's cries echoed in her ears, a sound that had haunted her for years. Tears welled in Naya's eyes. "I should have done more," she whispered. "I should have fought harder." The voice responded, "Guilt is a heavy burden, but it is also a teacher. Learn from it and let it guide your heart." Nia bowed her head, the tears falling freely. I will do better." The pool's surface calmed, and the glow of the carvings dimmed slightly. Nia stepped back, her heart lighter, and gestured for her father to take his turn. King Adebayo hesitated but moved to the pool. As he looked into the water, his reflection disappeared, replaced by a vision of himself as a young man. In the vision, he stood before his dying father, King Ogundele, who had ruled Dagara with wisdom and restraint. "I leave you a strong kingdom," the elder king said. "But remember, strength is not enough. Lead with wisdom, or the strength you cherish will destroy you." In the vision, Adebayo dismissed his father's words, consumed by the ambition to expand Dagara's borders. He watched himself march into battle after battle, his victories leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. The cries of the conquered echoed around him, growing louder until they became unbearable. "No," Adebayo said, clenching his fists. "I did what I had to do. I brought glory to our kingdom." The voice of the ancestors responded, "Glory is fleeting, but the scars of your actions remain. Will you carry them with pride or with humility?" Adebayo's jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, to defend his choices, but the weight of the vision crushed his resistance. Finally, he bowed his head. "I see now. My strength has blinded me to the pain I've caused. I will carry it with humility." The pool's surface rippled, and the chamber seemed to exhale, as though the den itself was pleased. Adebayo stepped back, his face pale but resolute. Elder Kofi approached the pool last, leaning heavily on his staff. When he gazed into the water, the vision that appeared was one of regret. He saw himself as a young man, standing by as a corrupt chief exploited the people of a small village. "You knew it was wrong," the vision said. "You could have spoken out, but you stayed silent." Kofi closed his eyes, the pain of the memory still fresh despite the decades that had passed. "I was afraid. I thought I could do more good by staying quiet and keeping my position. But I failed those people." The voice of the ancestors spoke. "Fear is natural, but courage is a choice. Will you continue to speak, even when it is difficult?" Kofi nodded, his voice steady. "I will. I will not remain silent again." The pool's glow faded, and the air in the chamber grew warmer, as though the trials had lifted a heavy burden. The group exchanged solemn glances, knowing they had passed another test. The path revealed. As they prepared to leave the chamber, the voice of the ancestors spoke once more. "The Heart of Umoja lies ahead, but one final test awaits. Be warned, only the pure of heart may approach it." A passageway opened in the far wall, revealing a narrow tunnel illuminated by faint golden light. The group hesitated, the weight of the voice's warning hanging over them. "We've come this far," Nia said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "We must see this through." King Adebayo placed a hand on her shoulder. For the first time, there was no trace of condescension or dismissal in his gaze, only respect. "Lead the way, my daughter." Nia nodded and stepped into the tunnel, followed closely by Adebayo and Kofi. The path ahead was uncertain, but they knew they could not turn back now. The narrow tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly, its golden light flickering like the dying embers of a fire. As Nia, King Adebayo, and Elder Kofi moved forward, the air grew heavier, pressing down on their shoulders. A sense of unease crept into their hearts, but none of them spoke. Each step felt like a test of their resolve. After what seemed like an eternity, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, unlike anything they had seen before. The walls were adorned with glowing patterns that seemed to shift and pulse like a heartbeat. At the center of the chamber, suspended in midair, was the Heart of Umoja. It was not a jewel or artifact as they had imagined, but a radiant orb of light, pulsing with a warmth that seemed to fill the entire space. Nia gasped, her breath catching in her throat. "It's beautiful!" Adebayo stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the glowing heart. "This is what I've been searching for," he murmured. "The key to uniting the kingdoms." Elder Kofi placed a hand on the king's shoulder. "Remember, Your Majesty, the heart is not something that can be taken. It must be earned." The moment they stepped closer to the heart, the chamber began to shift. The walls seemed to dissolve, replaced by a swirling void of light and shadow. A deep voice resonated through the air, louder and more commanding than before. "You stand before the Heart of Umoja, the embodiment of unity and wisdom. To claim it, you must pass the final trial, the trial of sacrifice." Before anyone could respond, the swirling void coalesced into 3 shimmering figures. Each one resembled a version of themselves. Nia as a child, Adebayo as a younger man, and Kofi in his prime. The illusions glowed faintly, their eyes filled with an unearthly light. The voice spoke again. "To unite the kingdoms, one must be willing to sacrifice their greatest desire. Each of you must face your own truth and make a choice. Only then will the heart reveal its power." The first figure stepped forward. It was the childlike image of Nia. The illusion spoke with her own voice, soft and trembling. "You've always wanted to protect others, Nia, to save them from pain. But to claim the heart, you must be willing to sacrifice your fear of failure. Will you accept that you cannot save everyone, no matter how much you wish to?" Nia stared at the illusion, her heart pounding. She remembered the burning village from her earlier vision, the child's cries haunting her. For years, she had carried the guilt, trying to prove she could be better, stronger, wiser. Tears filled her eyes, but she nodded. "I will accept it. I cannot save everyone, but I will still do everything I can." The illusion smiled faintly, then dissolved into light. A gentle warmth filled Nia's chest, as though the heart itself approved. The second figure, the younger version of Adebayo, stepped forward. He wore the armor of a warrior, his face proud and unyielding. "You've built your life around strength and conquest," the illusion said. "But to claim the heart, you must sacrifice your pride. You must acknowledge that unity cannot be forced and that others may lead better than you. Can you do this?" Adebayo's jaw tightened. He had spent his life believing in his own power, in his destiny to rule. The idea of stepping aside, of relinquishing control, felt like an unbearable weight. I don't know if I can," he admitted, his voice cracking. Elder Kofi spoke softly. "Your Majesty, as the ancestors say, the tree that bends in the wind does not break. True strength lies in humility." Adebayo closed his eyes, the words cutting through his resistance. Finally, he nodded. "I will try. I will let go of my pride." The illusion nodded solemnly before dissolving into light. Adebayo felt a strange peace settle over him, as though a great burden had been lifted. The third figure, the younger Kofi, stepped forward. He was dressed in the simple robes of a scholar, his face filled with regret. "You've spent your life guiding others," the illusion said. "But to claim the heart, you must sacrifice your fear of failure. You must accept that even your wisdom is limited and that others may not always heed your words. Will you let go of the need to control their choices?" Kofi bowed his head, his fingers tightening around his staff. He had spent decades offering counsel, often in frustration when his advice was ignored. But deep down, he knew the illusion was right. "I will accept it," Kofi said. "I cannot control the paths others take, but I can still offer my wisdom freely." The illusion smiled gently, then dissolved. A soft glow surrounded Kofi, filling him with quiet reassurance. The heart revealed. As the final illusion disappeared, the swirling void faded, and the chamber returned to its original form. The heart of Umoja pulsed brighter, its light spreading throughout the room. The voice spoke one final time. "You have faced your truths and made your sacrifices. The heart of Umoja is yours, not to possess, but to protect. Use its wisdom to guide your people and bring unity to the land." The orb of light descended slowly, its warmth enveloping Nia, Adebayo, and Kofi. For a moment, they were filled with a profound sense of connection, not just to each other, but to the land, its people, and the ancestors who had come before them. The journey back to the palace of Dagara was unlike the tense march to the leopard's den. The soldiers moved with a lighter step, and the whispers of war were replaced with murmurs of hope. At the center of the caravan, King Adebayo held the heart of Umoja in a ceremonial chest, its faint glow visible even through the thick fabric that covered it. He seemed quieter, reflective, as though the trials of the den had stripped away layers of his ambition and left something raw and vulnerable in its place. Princess Nia walked beside him, her eyes scanning the horizon. She felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. While her father had begun to change, the kingdom was still at a crossroads. Not everyone would welcome this shift toward peace. Oba's discontent. At the rear of the caravan, General Oba rode in silence, his face dark with anger. The humiliation he had suffered in the leopard's den had planted a seed of resentment that now grew like a thorny vine in his chest. He turned to his lieutenant, a burly man named Tunda. "The king has grown soft," Oba muttered. "This talk of peace will weaken Dagara. The other kingdoms will see us as cowards." Tunde hesitated. "But, General, the heart of Umoja is said to bring unity. Perhaps this is the way forward." Oba's eyes narrowed. "Unity? Bah! Unity is forged with fire and steel, not glowing relics and empty promises. Mark my words, Tunde. If Adebayo insists on this path, he will lead Dagara to ruin. And when that happens, I will be ready." The Queen's offer. When the caravan returned to Dagara, the people greeted them with cheers and relief. Many had feared the worst, believing the army might not return from the leopard's den. The sight of the king holding the heart of Umoja filled them with awe. King Adebayo wasted no time. He summoned his council, including Nia and Elder Kofi, and announced his decision to send a delegation to Nyoka to propose peace. "We will meet Queen Malika not as conquerors, but as allies," he declared. "The heart of Umoja has shown me the folly of our ambitions. It is time to build, not destroy." The council was divided. Some advisors praised the king's newfound wisdom, while others, including General Oba, voiced their concerns. "Your Majesty," Oba said, his voice carefully measured, "Nyoka has always been a thorn in our side. Are we to trust that their queen will welcome this offer of peace?" Adebayo met Oba's gaze, his voice calm but firm. "We cannot build trust without extending a hand. Queen Malika values wisdom and unity, as do I. She will listen." Within days, the delegation was ready. Nia insisted on accompanying her father, arguing that her understanding of Nyoka's culture and her connection to Kofi would be invaluable. Adebayo reluctantly agreed. The journey to Nyoka was swift and uneventful, the landscape shifting from dry savanna to lush forests. As they approached the gates of Nyoka's capital, the delegation was met by a group of Nyokan guards, their spears gleaming in the sunlight. Kofi stepped forward, addressing the guards in their native tongue. "We come in peace, bearing the heart of Umoja. Please grant us an audience with Queen Malika." The guards exchanged glances, then led the delegation into the city. Nia marveled at the beauty of Nyoka's capital, the winding rivers, the vibrant markets, and the towering Iroko trees that seemed to touch the sky. The people watched the delegation with wary curiosity, their expressions a mix of suspicion and hope. The meeting of kings. Queen Malika awaited them in her grand hall, seated on her throne of carved wood and adorned with the symbols of her kingdom. She was as regal as ever, her presence commanding respect and admiration. "King Adebayo," she said, her voice calm but guarded, "you come not with armies but with words. This is unexpected." Adebayo bowed deeply, surprising the court. "Queen Malika, I come to you not as a rival, but as a fellow leader who seeks a better future for our people. The Heart of Umoja has shown me the error of my ways." He gestured to Nia, who stepped forward and opened the ceremonial chest. The glow of the heart filled the room, and a collective gasp rippled through the Nyokan court. Malika's eyes widened, but she remained composed. "The Heart of Umoja is sacred to my people. How did it come into your possession?" Adebayo recounted their journey to the leopard's den, speaking openly about the trials they had faced and the lessons they had learned. He ended with a simple yet profound statement. "The heart is not mine to keep. It belongs to all of us, a symbol of what we can achieve together." Queen Malika rose from her throne, her expression unreadable. "You speak of unity, King Adebayo, but words alone are not enough. If we are to forge peace, there must be trust, and trust must be earned." Adebayo nodded. "What would you have me do?" Malika considered for a moment, then said, "Let us establish a council of kingdoms, a place where leaders can come together to resolve disputes without bloodshed. Let us start with Dagara and Nyoka, and in time, invite the other kingdoms to join." Nia stepped forward. "Your Majesty, that is a vision I would be proud to help build. Let me serve as a bridge between our people." Malika smiled faintly. "Your spirit is strong, young princess. Perhaps this council will be our legacy." Oba's defiance. As the terms of peace were being discussed, General Oba paced outside the Nyokan court, his frustration boiling over. He had accompanied the delegation reluctantly, and now he felt betrayed by Adebayo's decision. Tunde approached him cautiously. "General, what will you do?" Oba's voice was a low growl. "If the king will not lead Dagara to glory, then he does not deserve to lead at all." Tunde's eyes widened. "You mean to—" "Yes," Oba interrupted. "The time has come for a new ruler, and when the people see the king's weakness, they will welcome my strength." The ink on the peace accord was barely dry when tensions began to brew in the shadows. The Council of Dagara's delegation remained in Nyoka, negotiating the terms of a shared council of kingdoms. The air between the two courts was filled with cautious optimism, but behind the veil of diplomacy, General Oba worked to sow discord. Oba's subterfuge Oba moved like a shadow through the Nyokan capital, careful to avoid attracting attention. He had spent years cultivating a network of loyal soldiers and informants within Dagara's army, men who shared his belief that King Adebayo's turn toward peace was a sign of weakness. Now, he called on their loyalty. In a dimly lit tavern on the outskirts of the city, Oba gathered his closest allies. Tunde, his second-in-command, sat at his side, while a handful of discontented soldiers formed a tight circle around them. "The king has lost his way," Oba said, his voice low but commanding. "He seeks to bow before our enemies rather than conquer them. This so-called peace is nothing more than a surrender. One of the soldiers, a young man with fiery eyes, spoke up. "What do you propose, General?" Oba leaned forward, his face a mask of determination. "We will strike while the king is weak. A single blow to his authority, and the army will rally behind me. With the heart of Umoja in our hands, we will restore Dagara's glory." The men murmured their agreement, their discontent fueling their resolve. Oba's plan was set in motion. Meanwhile, the Nyokan court prepared to host a grand festival to celebrate the signing of the peace accord. The streets of the capital were adorned with vibrant decorations, and musicians and dancers filled the air with joyful energy. For the first time in years, the people of Nyoka and Dagara mingled as allies rather than enemies. Princess Nia stood beside Queen Malika, marveling at the transformation. "It's incredible," she said. "Just weeks ago, we were on the brink of war. Now our people are celebrating together." Malika smiled. "The Heart of Umoja has shown us the way, but unity is fragile. It must be nurtured, or it will crumble." Nia nodded, her thoughts briefly drifting to her father. Adebayo had been uncharacteristically quiet since their arrival in Nyoka, his mind clearly preoccupied with the weight of his choices. As night fell and the festival reached its peak, Oba and his men made their move. Disguised as Nyokan merchants, they slipped into the palace grounds, their weapons hidden beneath their robes. Oba had planned the attack carefully, aiming to strike during the festival when the court's attention was divided. Inside the palace, King Adebayo and Elder Kofi stood near the Heart of Umoja, which had been placed on display as a symbol of the newfound alliance. The radiant orb cast a warm glow over the room, drawing the admiration of both Nyokans and Dagarians. Suddenly, the doors burst open, and Oba's men stormed into the chamber. The crowd erupted in panic as the soldiers drew their weapons. "Traitors!" Oba roared, his voice cutting through the chaos. "This king has abandoned his duty to Dagara. I will restore our honor." Adebayo stepped forward, his face a mix of shock and anger. "Oba, what madness is this? Lay down your weapons before it's too late." "You are the one who has gone mad," Oba spat. "You have traded our strength for weakness, our glory for humiliation. The Heart of Umoja belongs to Dagara, not to these fools." Oba lunged toward the heart, but Nia stepped between him and the sacred artifact. "Stop this, General," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear coursing through her. "The heart is not a weapon. It is a symbol of unity." Oba sneered. "Step aside, girl. You know nothing of power." Before he could strike, Adebayo drew his sword and blocked the attack. "If you want the heart, Oba," he said coldly, "you'll have to go through me." The room erupted into chaos as Adebayo and Oba faced off. The king fought with the precision and strength of a seasoned warrior, but Oba's desperation and fury made him a formidable opponent. The sound of clashing steel filled the air as the two men exchanged blows. Meanwhile, Nia and Kofi worked to calm the panicked crowd. "Everyone, stay back!" Nia shouted. "This is not your fight." Kofi approached Malika, who stood with her guards, her face a mask of controlled anger. "We must act quickly," he said. "Oba's actions could undo everything we've built." Malika nodded. "My guards will contain the rebels, but the king must end this fight before it spills into the streets." The battle between Adebayo and Oba reached its climax as the two men clashed near the Heart of Umoja. Adebayo managed to disarm Oba, sending the general's sword skidding across the floor. He pointed his blade at Oba's chest, his face contorted with rage. "Do it!" Oba taunted. "Prove to your people that you're still a warrior." Adebayo hesitated, his grip tightening on the hilt of his sword. Then he glanced at the Heart of Umoja, its light pulsing gently, as if reminding him of the lessons he had learned. No, Adebayo said, lowering his weapon. I will not become the man you want me to be. Oba sneered. You think this makes you strong? It makes you weak. Strength is not in the sword, Adebayo replied. It is in the wisdom to know when to use it. As the guards subdued Oba and his men, the room fell silent. Adebayo turned to the crowd, his voice steady but firm. Today, we faced a great test. Let this remind us that unity is not achieved through force, but through understanding and compassion. We will not let the actions of a few destroy what we have built. Oba and his followers were imprisoned, their rebellion quashed. The festival resumed, albeit with a more subdued tone. Adebayo and Malika stood together, their alliance strengthened by the ordeal. Your decision to spare him was wise, Malika said. It showed your people that unity is stronger than vengeance. Adebayo nodded. The Heart of Umoja has taught me much, but I still have more to learn. With your guidance, I believe we can build something lasting. As the night wore on, Nia found herself standing before the heart, its light reflecting in her eyes. She felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that her role in the story was far from over. The morning after Oba's failed rebellion, a sense of calm returned to Nyoka, though it was fragile. Like the first rays of light after a storm, the air was thick with the weight of what had transpired, and the actions of the previous night lingered in everyone's minds. In the great hall of the Nyokan Palace, King Adebayo and Queen Malika convened with their closest advisors to decide the fate of General Oba and his followers. The Council of Justice, Oba, stood shackled before the assembled leaders, his defiance unbroken despite his defeat. His followers, though subdued, glared at the gathered council with sullen expressions. Queen Malika spoke first, her voice calm but commanding. General Oba, your actions nearly brought ruin to both our kingdoms. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Oba lifted his chin. I acted for the glory of Dagara. A king who abandons strength for weakness does not deserve the throne. King Adebayo's gaze was cold. You speak of strength, but you do not understand its true meaning. Strength is not in the sword you wield, but in the wisdom to wield it sparingly. Spare me your speeches, Oba spat. The people will see you for what you are, a coward. Nia stepped forward, her voice steady. You are wrong, General. The people will see my father's decision to spare you as an act of strength, not weakness. It takes far more courage to choose peace than to embrace violence. The council murmured in agreement, and Queen Malika raised her hand for silence. What should be done with him, King Adebayo? His fate rests with you. Adebayo hesitated, his mind turning over the lessons of the leopard's den. Finally, he spoke. Oba will live, but he will no longer serve as a general. He will be exiled to the farthest reaches of Dagara, where he can do no harm. As for his followers, they will be given a choice. Swear loyalty to the peace we have forged, or join their leader in exile. The decision was met with a mix of relief and dissatisfaction. Some, particularly those loyal to Oba, grumbled at the perceived leniency. But most of the council recognized the wisdom in Adebayo's choice. The birth of the Council of Kingdoms. With the immediate threat resolved, attention turned to the larger goal, establishing a lasting alliance between Dagara, Nyoka, and the other neighboring kingdoms. The Heart of Umoja remained at the center of their discussions, its glow a reminder of the unity they sought to achieve. Queen Malika addressed the gathered leaders. The Council of Kingdoms must be a place where leaders can meet as equals to resolve disputes without bloodshed. But to succeed, it must be built on trust. Elder Kofi, leaning on his staff, nodded. Trust is like a tree. It grows slowly and must be tended with care. Let us begin with a smaller council. a core of leaders from our two kingdoms, and expand as others see the fruits of our efforts. King Adebayo agreed. We will host the first meeting of this council in Dagara to show our people that this alliance is more than words. Together, we will lead by example. Nia spoke up, her voice filled with quiet conviction. Let the Heart of Umoja be the symbol of this council. It belongs to all of us, a reminder that unity is our greatest strength. The room buzzed with approval, and plans were set in motion for the first gathering of the Council of Kingdoms. Later that evening, Nia found her father alone in the Nyokan Gardens, gazing at the stars. She approached quietly, her steps soft against the stone path. You've changed, father, she said, breaking the silence. Adebayo turned to her, a small smile on his lips. The leopard's den showed me what I had forgotten. For too long, I believed that power was the only way to secure our future. But you've shown me a different path. Nia blushed slightly, but held his gaze. It wasn't just me. The Heart of Umoja, Elder Kofi, even Queen Malika, they all played a part. Adebayo nodded. True, but it was your courage that brought us here. I see now that the future of Dagara lies in hands like yours, hands that build, not destroy. Nia felt a lump rise in her throat. Her father's words were more than praise. They were an acknowledgement of her worth, something she had longed for. We still have much to do, she said softly. We do, Adebayo agreed, but I believe we are on the right path. The shadows of doubt. Unbeknownst to the royal family, Oba's exile did not mark the end of his ambitions. As he was escorted out of Nyoka under heavy guard, his mind churned with thoughts of revenge. He had underestimated Adebayo and Nia once, but he vowed never to make the same mistake again. To Tunde, who rode beside him, he whispered, "The leopard may retreat, but it never forgets its prey. This is not the end." Tunde's eyes flickered with unease, but he said nothing. Oba's words hung in the air like a dark promise, a reminder that the seeds of discord could still take root. As Dagara's delegation prepared to return home, the people of Nyoka gathered to bid them farewell. The festival resumed, its spirit of celebration reignited by the prospect of peace. Kofi approached Nia as she stood at the edge of the crowd, her gaze distant. "You've done well, princess," he said, "but the road ahead will not be easy." "I know," Nia replied, "but as you've always said, the river carves the rock not through strength, but through persistence. We will keep moving forward." Kofi smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "You are wise beyond your years, Nia. The ancestors would be proud." As the delegation began their journey back to Dagara, Nia felt a sense of hope stirring in her heart. The challenges were far from over, but for the first time, she believed that true unity was possible. The delegation from Dagara returned to their kingdom with a renewed sense of purpose. The story of the Heart of Umoja and King Adebayo's transformation spread quickly, inspiring hope among the people. Yet, as preparations for the first meeting of the Council of Kingdoms began, cracks in the fragile alliance started to show. Dagara's divided court. In the grand hall of the palace, King Adebayo stood before his council. The Heart of Umoja, now enshrined in a ceremonial pedestal, radiated a warm glow that seemed to fill the room with an air of calm. Adebayo addressed his advisors, his voice steady. "We will host the first gathering of the Council of Kingdoms here in Dagara. Leaders from across the land will be invited to witness the power of unity." The room erupted in murmurs. While some advisors supported the king's vision, others, particularly those loyal to Oba's ideals, voiced their doubts. "Your Majesty," said one advisor, an older man named Bakari, "opening our gates to other kingdoms is a risk. Not all who come will share your noble intentions. Adebayo nodded. That is true, but unity cannot be achieved without trust. We must lead by example. Another voice cut through the room, this one sharper. And what of our strength, Your Majesty? Asked Omari, a young and ambitious general. Hosting this council may make us appear weak. The other kingdoms could see it as an opportunity to exploit us. Before Adebayo could respond, Nia stepped forward. Strength is not in how tightly we hold our swords, but in how wisely we use them. If we close ourselves off, we will only invite fear and resentment. Her words carried weight, and though Omari's expression remained skeptical, he fell silent. Adebayo raised a hand to quiet the room. The council is our path forward. Let those who doubt it see the heart of Umoja and judge for themselves. Our strength lies not in isolation, but in cooperation. Trouble at the borders. While Dagara prepared for the council, word reached the palace of unrest at the kingdom's borders. A band of mercenaries had begun raiding villages, sowing fear and chaos. The attacks were swift and coordinated, leaving little trace of the attacker's identity. General Omari, eager to prove his loyalty and strength, urged Adebayo to send the army to crush the raiders. This is a direct challenge to your rule, he argued. If we do not respond with force, it will embolden others. Elder Kofi, seated quietly in the corner, spoke up. Violence will only breed more violence. We must learn the cause of this unrest before we act. As the ancestors say, the fire that burns the forest often starts with a single spark. Adebayo considered their words carefully. Send scouts to investigate, he decided. I want to know who these raiders are and why they attack. We will not act blindly. Omari bristled, but obeyed the king's orders. Unbeknownst to him, the mercenaries were not ordinary raiders. They were remnants of Oba's loyalists, carrying out his plans from exile. The guests arrived. As the day of the council approached, emissaries from neighboring kingdoms began arriving in Dagara. The palace, with its red clay walls and intricately carved pillars, bustled with activity. Delegates brought gifts of gold, spices, and rare artifacts, each trying to impress and outdo the others. Among the first to arrive was Queen Malika of Nyoka, accompanied by her trusted advisor, Tano. She and her delegation were received with great ceremony, and Nia personally welcomed her at the palace gates. Queen Malika, Nia said, bowing deeply, it is an honor to have you here. Malika smiled warmly. The honor is mine, Princess. I see your kingdom thrives under your father's leadership. Nia hesitated. It has not been easy, but we are committed to this path. Good, Malika said, her voice soft but firm. Unity requires patience and resilience. You and your father will need both. As more delegations arrived, tensions began to rise. Representatives from rival kingdoms eyed each other warily, old grudges threatening to overshadow the spirit of unity. Nia and Adebayo worked tirelessly to mediate disputes, but it was clear that not all shared their vision. Late one evening, as the preparations reached their final stages, one of the scouts sent to investigate the border raids returned to the palace. He was bloodied and exhausted, his expression grim. Your Majesty, he said, addressing Adebayo, the raiders are not mere mercenaries. They are remnants of General Oba's forces. The room fell silent. Nia's heart sank as the scout continued. They have regrouped under Oba's command and are amassing strength. Their attacks are meant to weaken our borders and create chaos before the council. Adebayo clenched his fists. Oba's defiance knows no bounds. We must act now, Omari said, his voice rising. If we do not crush them, they will strike during the council and destroy everything we have built. Nia spoke up, her voice steady. but urgent. If we attack rashly, we risk turning this council into a battlefield. There must be another way. Elder Kofi nodded. Princess Nia is right. As the ancestors say, the wise hunter waits for the lion to come to him. We must use this council to draw Oba into the light. Let his actions expose him for what he is. Adebayo took a deep breath, the weight of the decision pressing on him. Finally, he said, "We will proceed with the council, but we must be prepared for anything." The calm before the storm. As the day of the council dawned, the palace was filled with a sense of anticipation. Delegates from across the land gathered in the grand hall, their voices blending into a low hum of conversation. The Heart of Umoja, displayed at the center of the room, radiated its warm glow, a symbol of hope and unity. Nia stood beside her father, her heart racing. She knew that the council was a fragile thread holding the kingdoms together, and Oba's shadow loomed over it. Queen Malika approached them, her expression calm but serious. "Today will test us all," she said. "But remember, unity is not achieved in a single moment. It is forged over time." Adebayo nodded. "Let us hope that time is on our side." As the council began, the leaders took their seats, each bearing the weight of their kingdom's hopes and fears. But in the shadows, unseen and waiting, Oba's forces prepared to strike. The grand hall of Dagara's palace thrummed with the weight of history in the making. Delegates from across the kingdoms sat in a circular formation, their colorful robes and ceremonial adornments reflecting their diverse cultures. At the center of the hall, the Heart of Umoja glowed softly on its pedestal, a silent reminder of the unity they sought to achieve. King Adebayo stood at the head of the assembly, his presence commanding yet humble. Beside him, Princess Nia and Queen Malika represented the shared vision of peace. Elder Kofi watched quietly from the sidelines, his wise eyes scanning the room. Adebayo began the council with a simple declaration. "We gather here not as rivals, but as leaders who share a responsibility to our people." The Heart of Umoja reminds us that strength lies in unity. Let us work together to build a future of peace. The room erupted in murmurs. Some delegates nodded in agreement, while others whispered their doubts. Among the latter was Chief Amara of Zuberi, a stout man with a booming voice. "Peace is a noble goal, King Adebayo," Amara said, rising from his seat. "But words alone cannot erase the scars of the past. My people have suffered greatly at the hands of Dagara's armies. How can we trust that this alliance will not become another means of domination?" Adebayo met Amara's gaze. "Your doubts are valid, Chief Amara. I will not deny the wrongs of the past. But this council is not about my kingdom's ambitions. It is about creating a foundation where no one kingdom holds power over another." Amara folded his arms but said nothing, his expression softening slightly. The council continued, with delegates voicing their concerns and proposals. Slowly, a tentative spirit of cooperation began to take root. In the shadows of the city, Oba's forces waited for their signal. Disguised as traders and festival attendees, they had infiltrated the palace grounds over the past several days. Their leader, Oba, sat in a hidden camp on the outskirts of the city, his eyes fixed on the smoke rising from the palace chimneys. Tunde approached him, his face tense. "The council has begun, General. Are you certain this is the right time to strike?" Oba's expression darkened. "This council is a mockery of Dagara's strength. When we strike, we will remind the world who truly commands respect. Prepare the men." "But the Heart of Umoja," Tunde said hesitantly. "Its presence has stirred hope among the people. If we destroy it..." Oba cut him off. "The heart is a tool, nothing more. Destroying it will show that unity is an illusion. Strength is the only truth." Tunde nodded reluctantly and left to relay the orders. Oba stared toward the palace, his heart burning with ambition and resentment. Back in the grand hall, the discussions were interrupted by a sudden commotion outside. A guard entered, his face pale. "Your Majesty, there is unrest in the outer courtyard. A group of armed men has been discovered near the festival grounds." Adebayo's face hardened. "Who are they?" The guard hesitated. "We believe they are remnants of General Oba's forces." Gasps rippled through the assembly. Nia turned to her father. "He's here. I knew he wouldn't stay in exile." Queen Malika stepped forward. "This is a calculated move. Oba wants to disrupt the council and destroy everything we've built." Adebayo nodded. "We must act swiftly. Nia, Malika, stay here and keep the delegates calm. I will handle this." "No, father," Nia said firmly. "This is a test for all of us. The council must stand united against this threat. If we act as one, we can stop him." Adebayo looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. Guards, secure the hall. No one leaves until this threat is dealt with." Oba's forces launched their attack at sunset, their movements swift and coordinated. The festival goers scattered in panic as the raiders stormed the courtyard, their weapons glinting in the fading light. Adebayo led the palace guards in defense, his sword flashing as he fought alongside his men. Though older than many of the soldiers, his strength and skill were undiminished, and his presence inspired those around him. Meanwhile, Nia and Malika worked to rally the delegates inside the hall. "This is our chance to prove the strength of unity," Naya said. "If we stand together, we can overcome this." Chief Amara, who had been one of the council's loudest skeptics, rose to his feet. "She's right. My people have seen enough war. Let us end this together." The delegates nodded in agreement, their resolve hardening. Under Nia's guidance, they began organizing the unarmed festival goers into safe areas while the palace guards held the attackers at bay. The confrontation. As the battle raged, Oba himself entered the courtyard, his presence like a dark shadow. He moved with ruthless efficiency, cutting down any who stood in his path. His eyes burned with fury as he approached the grand hall. Adebayo intercepted him at the steps, their swords clashing with a deafening clang. The two men fought fiercely, their movements a blur of strength and precision. "You've always underestimated me, Adebayo," Oba growled. "You think this council will save Dagara? It's a lie." "This council is not about Dagara alone," Adebayo replied, blocking a powerful strike. "It's about the future of all our people." Oba sneered. "Spare me your speeches. You've grown weak, old friend." "And you've grown blind," Adebayo shot back. "Strength without purpose is destruction." Their battle reached its peak as Oba lunged for the Heart of Umoja. Nia appeared just in time, stepping between him and the sacred artifact. "Enough, Oba," she said, her voice steady. "Look around you. The people you claim to fight for are suffering because of your greed. Is this the legacy you want to leave?" Oba hesitated, his sword trembling in his hand. For a brief moment, doubt flickered in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by rage. He raised his weapon to strike, but Adebayo disarmed him with a swift blow. The guards surrounded Oba, dragging him to his knees. The battle was over, unity restored. As dawn broke over Dagara, the aftermath of the attack became clear. Though shaken, the council remained intact, its members more resolved than ever to pursue peace. The delegates, inspired by Nia's courage and Adebayo's leadership, pledged to support the Council of Kingdoms. Oba, now a prisoner, was brought before the assembly. Adebayo addressed him one last time. "You sought to destroy unity, but unity has defeated you. Let this be a lesson to all who would choose division over understanding." The delegates cheered, their voices echoing through the grand hall. For the first time, the vision of a united land felt within reach. The grand hall of Dagara's palace was quiet in the early morning light. The heart of Umoja rested in its ceremonial pedestal, its glow soft but steady, as though reflecting the fragile hope that had taken root in the hearts of the gathered leaders. After the chaos of the previous night, the council reconvened, determined to turn the attack into a catalyst for unity. A debriefing of the attack. King Adebayo addressed the delegates, his voice measured but firm. Last night's events were a test of our resolve. General Oba's actions remind us that unity is not without opposition, but we have proven that together we are stronger than any threat. The room murmured in agreement, though the wounds of the battle were still fresh. Chief Amara, whose skepticism had softened during the attack, rose from his seat. Your Majesty, while I commend your leadership, this council will only succeed if we address the root causes of such unrest. Oba's followers were driven by more than loyalty to their general. Many among them believe that peace makes us vulnerable. Queen Malika nodded. Chief Amara speaks wisely. Fear and mistrust must be acknowledged and addressed. If we ignore them, they will fester. Princess Nia stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. Then let us make trust the foundation of this council. The heart of Umoja is a symbol of unity, but it is up to us to show our people that peace is not weakness, it is strength. The delegates exchanged thoughtful glances, their confidence in Nia growing. Slowly, they began to propose measures for building trust and cooperation between their kingdoms. Over the next several days, the council worked tirelessly to draft the principles that would guide their alliance. The discussions were often heated as representatives from rival kingdoms clashed over old grievances and differing priorities. Yet, amidst the disagreements, a shared commitment to the future began to emerge. One of the first proposals came from Queen Malika. Trade must become the lifeblood of our alliance. If our people see the benefits of cooperation in their daily lives, they will embrace unity. Chief Amara added, we must also ensure that justice is fair and impartial. A council of elders chosen from each kingdom can mediate disputes. Nia suggested a cultural exchange program where artists, scholars, and storytellers from each kingdom could travel freely to share their traditions. Understanding each other's stories is the first step towards true unity, she said, earning nods of approval from the delegates. Elder Kofi, who had observed the proceedings quietly, finally spoke. As the ancestors say, a pot does not boil with water alone. This council must have strength to back its principles. Let us create a shared guard drawn from all kingdoms to protect our alliance from threats both within and without. The room buzzed with debate, but by the end of the week, a clear framework for the Council of Kingdoms had taken shape. It was an imperfect foundation, but it was a beginning, a message from Oba. Though Oba was imprisoned, his influence lingered. One morning, a guard brought word that the disgraced general had requested an audience with the king. Adebayo agreed, though his heart was heavy with caution. In the dim light of the dungeon, Adebayo stood before Oba's cell. The once proud general was a shadow of his former self, his eyes hollow, but still burning with defiance. You asked to speak, Adebayo said, his tone neutral. Oba leaned against the wall, his voice hoarse. You think you've won, but this council of yours will fail. The people will never trust each other, and the kingdoms will never stay united. Perhaps, Adebayo replied, but I will not abandon the effort. Unity is a journey, not a destination. Oba sneered. You've grown soft, Adebayo. The man I once followed would never waste his time with such idealism. The man you once followed made many mistakes, Adebayo said, his gaze steady. But I have learned from them. That is the difference between us, Oba. You cling to the past, while I look to the future. Oba's laughter echoed through the cell as Adebayo turned to leave. "You'll see, old friend. When this alliance crumbles, you'll remember my words." The culmination of the council's work came on the final day of the gathering. Delegates, citizens, and soldiers crowded into the grand hall, eager to witness the signing of the first Declaration of Unity. The document, known as the Charter of Umoja, outlined the principles of the alliance: mutual respect, shared prosperity, and collective defense. King Adebayo stood before the assembly, flanked by Queen Malika and Princess Nia. "This is a historic moment," he said. "Today, we declare not just an alliance, but a commitment to a shared future." The Heart of Umoja reminds us that our strength lies not in conquest, but in cooperation. The delegates signed the charter one by one, each adding their kingdom's seal. When the final signature was placed, the room erupted in cheers, the sound echoing through the palace and into the streets beyond. That evening, as the celebrations continued, Nia found herself standing before the Heart of Umoja. She placed her hand on the glowing orb, feeling its warmth spread through her. "You've done well," Elder Kofi said, approaching quietly. Nia smiled. "We've all done well, but this is just the beginning." Kofi nodded. "Indeed, the path ahead will not be easy, but as the ancestors say, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And today, you have taken that step." Adebayo joined them, his expression softened by pride. "Your wisdom has guided us here, Nia. I see now that Dagara's future is in capable hands." Tears welled in Nia's eyes, but she held her composure. "Thank you, Father. I only hope to honor the lessons we've learned." Together, they gazed at the Heart of Umoja, its light shining brighter than ever, a beacon of hope for the United Kingdoms. As the days turned into weeks, the Council's efforts began to show results. Trade routes reopened under neutral oversight, bringing prosperity to once divided regions. Villages devastated by war were rebuilt with the help of resources pooled from multiple kingdoms. Slowly but surely, the promise of unity began to take shape. Yet, the shadow of Oba's rebellion loomed large, threatening to undo all they had achieved. Late one night, word reached the palace that a group of Oba's loyalists had gathered near the capital, their numbers growing with each passing day. Led by Tunde, the rebels planned to storm the city and destroy the council, claiming it as a betrayal of Dagara's strength. King Adebayo called an emergency meeting with his closest advisors, including Nia, Queen Malika, and Elder Kofi. "This is the moment of truth," Adebayo said, his voice steady. "If we fail to stop this rebellion, the council will collapse." "Violence will not secure the council's future," Nia said. "We must show the people why unity is worth fighting for, not with swords, but with actions." Queen Malika nodded. "The council's strength lies in its people. If they stand with us, the rebels will have no ground to stand on." Elder Kofi added, "As the ancestors say, the river does not stop flowing because of a single stone. We must confront this threat without abandoning our principles." Nia and Adebayo made a bold decision. They would address the people directly. Standing in the city square, with the Heart of Umoja glowing beside them, they called for a gathering of citizens and council supporters. The crowd that assembled was large and tense, their faces reflecting a mix of fear and hope. Nia stepped forward, her voice clear and resolute. "People of Dagara, of Nyoka, and beyond," she began. "We stand at a crossroads. The path of division has brought us only pain and destruction. The path of unity offers a chance for a better future, but only if we walk it together." Adebayo spoke next, his voice carrying the weight of his transformation. "I have made mistakes, but I have learned that true strength lies not in conquest, but in cooperation. The Heart of Umoja is a reminder that we are stronger together than we are apart. Their words resonated, and a ripple of support began to spread through the crowd. When news of the gathering reached the rebels' camp, Tunde realized that their plans were crumbling. Determined to strike before their momentum was lost, Tunde led the rebels in a desperate assault on the city. But the people of Dagara, inspired by Nia and Adebayo's leadership, rallied to defend their home. Soldiers loyal to the council joined forces with citizens, forming a united front that outmatched the rebels. As the battle reached its climax, Tunde was captured and brought before King Adebayo. The rebel leader's defiance had been replaced by fear. "You have failed, Tunde," Adebayo said, his voice calm but firm. "Your loyalty to Oba blinded you to the truth. Unity is the way forward. Your rebellion ends here." Tunde bowed his head, his spirit broken. The remaining rebels surrendered, and the city erupted in cheers as the people celebrated their victory. With the rebellion quashed, the council's future was secured. Delegates from neighboring kingdoms pledged their support, and the alliance grew stronger. The Heart of Umoja became a symbol of hope, not just for Dagara and Nyoka, but for all the kingdoms of the region. As the dust settled, Nia stood with her father and Queen Malika before the gathered crowd. Her heart swelled with pride as she saw the faces of people from every walk of life standing together. "Today, we have proven that unity is not just a dream," she said. "It is a reality we can achieve if we stand together. This is not the end of our journey. It is only the beginning." Adebayo placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice filled with pride. "You have led us here, Nia. The future belongs to you." Elder Kofi, watching from the sidelines, smiled. As the ancestors say, a single tree cannot make a forest. Today, we have planted the seeds of something greater than ourselves. Years later, the Council of Kingdoms became a beacon of hope across the land. Nia, now queen, presided over its meetings with wisdom and compassion, ensuring that the lessons of the past were never forgotten. The Heart of Umoja continued to shine, its light a reminder of the strength found in unity. And though challenges remained, the people knew that as long as they stood together, no storm could break them. Thank you so much for tuning in. Stay tuned for new stories. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.